Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again. This week, going back 45 years to 1980, April 11th, to be exact, as we cover the debut self-titled album from Iron Maiden. But before we talk all things Iron Maiden, how are you, my friend?
Very good. This has been a fun week of listening to Iron Maiden, old and not as old. So it should make
although rather old by comparison at this point.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that, but it's actually it's funny when you think about it because Brave New World is closer to Iron Maiden's debut album than we are now to Brave New World.
When you think about it like that, it's frightening. I mean, truly frightening, as obviously I was not familiar with the Iron Maiden debut when it came out, but I was very familiar with Brave New World when it came out, and in many ways it seems like it was yesterday. But we'll talk more about Brave New World next week. But I'm so happy that you picked this episode, and I have a lot of thoughts on this album. But before we talk about Iron Maiden, the debut, lots of stuff has been coming out fast and furiously, and I'm curious if you had a chance to check any of this stuff out. I guess we'll start at the top with Amorphous. Their new single, Light and Shadow, dropped yesterday as of the time of this recording, and I wanted to know if you listened to it, and if so, what your thoughts were. I still maintain that this is probably the most consistent band in the world at this point, just because everything they do is great, and it kind of all sounds a little bit samey in certain ways, but I'll be damned, another good single from them.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I haven't had a chance to listen to the whole thing, but the little bit that I heard was, like you said, it's vintage vintage Amorphous. So it came with the announcement that they will have a new album released. I believe it was at the end of September, and it's going to be called Borderland. This was one of those things where, like, they didn't just release a single. They were just like, here's a single. Also, we have an album coming out. So the heavy hitters for 2025 continue. It's going to be really both of our top 10s are going to be very interesting. I'll just say that because there's a lot of between Amorphous and Halloween and Stardust and there's just and some of the stuff that's already been released. There's just so much. I feel like there's a lot more higher expectation type situations this year than last year with certain bands. So it's exciting. We still have more than half the year to go. So. Plenty to still dig into.
Yes, and that album that you mentioned, Borderland, comes out September 26th, to be exact. So you were right, the end of September. I have a feeling our lists may be markedly different this year. I think there's going to be some albums
that's not unusual for us.
No. I may be more of the same in that regard as well, but I do think it's going to be a little bit different, although I've come to a little bit of a grinding halt. I was compiling my list, and I have my honorable mentions, and I listen to this stuff, and I move stuff around throughout the year. But like over the last month, I really haven't added much new stuff to it. There's still stuff I need to digest. I listened to the new Catatonia album this week. Didn't really grab me after the first listen. I want to give it another shot. The new Volbeat was surprisingly good. I actually rather enjoyed that. I want to go back and give that some more time. But I want to also mention the new Crown single, Waiting for You. This band just, I don't know. I never expect to hear new stuff. And then all of a sudden a new song drops and they announce a new album. And I'm like, I'm there for it. They are so consistently good. This obviously on the heels of the new Art Nation release as well. So, no shortage of work there for those guys, but another really good single, the kind of thing that I think just about everyone that listens to this podcast would enjoy. No matter what kind of a fan you are, there's just something to sink your teeth into with Crown.
Yes, I know we both have been excited for their next release after 2023's Operation Phoenix both kind of blew both of our socks off, and so this is the first single from Wonderland. It comes out August 22nd. So again, another, I think, album with high expectations this year. Is that the same date as the Halloween album release too, or very close to it? Because I know that album comes out in August as well. I'm just going to double check that, because if those two albums come out on the same day, that's going to be a hell of a day. No, Halloween comes out the week after on the 29th.
It's going to be a very, very busy summer into the fall season. Things always seem to die down by like the end of November, but I'll say that basically between now and Thanksgiving, we're in for a busy few months, but I'm there for it. A lot of stuff that I'm looking forward to. I'm wondering if there's anything that you heard this week that caught your ear or anything that's noteworthy.
Probably not. I continue to collect the singles, but don't always listen to them right away. So, there's new stuff from War Kings and, Sabaton has a new single called Hordes of Khan. No idea if that's for an upcoming album or not. But War Kings has a new single from their upcoming album Armageddon called Kings of Ragnarok. Other than that, nothing really that we haven't mentioned. You didn't just mention, or we didn't mention last week. So just keeping an eye on things. I've been a little sluggish with listening to new stuff, as mentioned, especially with kind of prepping for 2 albums at once this week. So I hope to throughout the month of June, towards the end of the month, really trying to catch up on everything. There's certain things that, like, when it comes out, I need to listen to it immediately. The Art Nation album comes to mind, and then there's other stuff where it's like I'll get to it eventually. So I need like one really busy work day where I can like bang out like 4 or 5 albums. But in the meantime, I'm just kind of focusing on the podcast. But I will catch up. I always do somehow.
Well, I'm happy that you picked the Iron Maiden album this week for a couple of reasons, and we kind of alluded to this last week, but there had been a chat with our Patreon members talking about like the comparison and contrast, or I guess comparing and contrasting 2 different albums by the same band, and they don't necessarily have to be like a great album and a album that maybe not as good, but really just 2 different eras of the same band, and that's what you decided to do with the debut album and Brave New World. Ironically, 20 years apart or whatnot. So it's definitely you notice the passage of time. But as we focus on the debut album, what was interesting to me, and I can't always say this, but you happened to pick an album that I was dying to listen to this week. And I don't know that I've ever said that on the podcast. Like you pick albums that I enjoy or albums that maybe I don't know as well. But here I was just in the mood for this particular album at this particular time. And I don't know if that's going to be a reflection of the score that I ultimately give it or my enjoyment of the album, but I'll be damned. It was something that I wanted to listen to this week anyway, because the band was playing a lot of old songs in their new set list. And I just said, you know what, I got to go listen to got to go back in time and dig into some of the archives. And then you picked it. So the timing was fantastic, and I'm still riding a high from this album because I don't think I ever realized how good it is. And then I went back and I listened to Killers too, just to kind of do a comparison between the debut and Killers. And honestly, I actually prefer this album, and I'm not even sure that it's that close. Killers I liked. I remember giving it a 7. I think you gave it an 8. It's a very solid album with some good songs, but this album is better, in my opinion. Just top to bottom, it's a more complete album, and I think that my score will probably reflect that.
Very nice. I'm curious to see how I feel. I wanted to go back and listen to Killers, and then I forgot to. Because I thought that would be a good counterpoint to this album, because these are really the 2 albums that kind of go together, because they are the only ones with Paul Di'Anno on vocals. And I think that even beyond that, when Bruce Dickinson joined the band for Number of the Beast, I think that the band kind of did a very quick maturation and a quick change to a more, I think, traditional heavy metal sound, whereas these first 2 albums actually have a little bit of kind of like a punk rock kind of vibe to it, mixed with 70s like hard rock. We discussed I'm forgetting the name of the UFO. UFO, yeah. Yes. Like you could definitely hear some of the inspiration there, but then like there is a little bit of kind of a punkiness to it, which I think kind of gives it this really unique sound that you don't get on any of the Iron Maiden albums that follow these first two. So it's interesting. I feel like before we covered Killers, I kind of stayed away from these albums. I think more due to the production value than anything else. And, you know, I'm so glad that through the podcast, we've gone back and listened to both, because like there really is so much good quality music here. I know, the band has criticized the quality of the production on this, but for an album that came out in 1980, that was a band's, you know, debut album, I don't think it's that bad, honestly. It's just different sounding. Like the jump between this and Number of the Beast 2 years later is it's such a different vibe, but there's still so much good going on here, and I think that it's cool that the band still digs into this era, the first 2 years, because there's just some really cool stuff, some really like upbeat and heavy stuff. I think that they haven't quite gotten to like their, you know, we're gonna do like delve into long historical like songs and stuff like that. Like this is just kind of like, let's just like rock out, and it has almost like a little bit more of like a fun quality to it, and less seriousness to it. So that's kind of my general thoughts.
I agree with you with the hard rock meets punk sound. I think UFO is the perfect comparison. I think there's a reason they open their shows to this day with Doctor Doctor. The UFO influence is clear, but some of the guitar riffs and some of the drum patterns really do give a punk vibe as well. And that was really what was going on in the scene, you know, late 70s, early 80s, just in terms of what, you know, the rock scene was. So I think it makes sense. I'll also add this, you know, the lineup on this album is different, right? Like this is not your Number of the Beast lineup. And so even though it was 2 years, I think it was the addition of some of the band members that came on, you know, just 2 years later that kind of caused the change in sound. But I like it. I think it's really good. And I don't think we get to Hallowed Be Thy Name if we don't have songs like some of the songs which I'll mention later on this particular album. Just to complete the narrative, obviously Paul Di'Anno on vocals, Dave Murray on guitars, Dennis Stratton on guitars and backing vocals, obviously Steve Harris on bass and backing vocals, and Clive Burr on drums. And Clive Burr has a bit of a different style of his drumming than Nico McBrain would later adopt on all the other albums. And I say that because he's got a little bit more of a groove to his drumming. It's a little just a little more groovy in a sense, and I think it's the way he kind of lays down his beats that gives the punk vibe or the hard rock vibe, as opposed to the quote unquote heavy metal vibe that the band would become known for. So I just found that to be interesting. And as I mentioned earlier, this album comes out April 11th, 1980. The band had already been around for 5 years at this point, and some of these tracks actually appeared on a demo EP called the Soundhouse Tapes, which had come out in late 79. And they're kind of different versions of Prowler and Iron Maiden. And it's a really interesting listen if you've never heard it, but so far ahead of its time, just because you can see how some of these songs would develop into some of the songs that are on later albums. And I'll even mention one or two songs that I heard when I listened to this debut release.
Yeah, very well said. I'm with you 100%.
So with that said, had you ever listened to this entire album before, or was this the first time that you ever did a real deep dive listening to all of these tracks back to back?
I may have a long time ago. I don't really remember. There were definitely songs that I knew way better than others. I'm sure you can probably figure out which ones, but I'd say that even still, like every song I listened to had some sense of familiarity, and it could just be from seeing the band live a handful of times or just the style or whatever. But like, you know, I didn't like hear any of the songs and been like, wow, I'm shocked at that, either like good or bad. Like it was pretty much, especially after listening to Killers, it was pretty on par with what I expected. Running Free was a track that I believe they had the Live After Death version on the Best of the Beast compilation, and so that probably was the first song that I had heard from this album. And then, just through being a metal fan, you eventually I think you, as a rite of passage, eventually hear Phantom of the Opera and Iron Maiden. Those two songs are just like part of your education, so to speak. So those were the three that I was like super familiar with. The other ones were kind of new to me, and so this was the first time I listened to it like repeatedly. And I can only imagine what it must have been like in 1980 for like a young metal fan to pick up this album, and just it must have been really unlike anything they'd ever heard. And like I wonder, I have to wonder like what, if anybody had any idea like what this was the beginning of and like what this would turn into. It's just kind of crazy to think of like Iron Maiden existing with only one album and like this is the album. It's wild.
And to say nothing of the fact that they have this classic Iron Maiden font on the cover of the record at the time, and then this like scary but kind of goofy version of Eddie with the hair sticking up all over the place. He kind of looks emaciated. It's just funny to me because like the imagery, I imagine walking into Tower Records and seeing this and being like, I don't know what this is, but I want to listen to it. It's just like it kind of appeals to that like young male audience in certain ways. And I guess there's a bit of a curiosity factor as to, is this Judas Priest? Is this the Sex Pistols? Like, what the hell is this UFO? Because UFO didn't have cover art that looked like this. It was really all part of the imagery and some of the the lyrics and obviously a lot of the things that they would pull from for decades to come to this day, right? 45 years later, and they still have Eddie adorning the cover of their albums in some way, shape, or form.
Or maybe you're just a big fan of ancient torture devices and you saw the name Iron Maiden. You were like, hell yeah, let me get on board with this. I'm going to put this next to my Guillotine album.
There you go. I love it. So I think without further ado, let's get into it. The album kicks off with a song called Prowler, which is really, I think, a perfect choice to open this album up, right? So you've never heard this band. You take a shot based on the album cover art or something like this, and all of a sudden, my first thoughts were, it sounds like just a bit dated, but I didn't think the mix was bad at all. I actually rather liked it because the sound between the guitars and the bass sounds really good. The verses are catchy. Di'Anno sounds fantastic. It's obviously different than Bruce, but he sounds great on a track like this. And when I heard this track, I kept thinking UFO through and through. I don't hear it on every track, but on this one, it was like up front and center for me. And I can't help but think that Steve Harris had a lot to say about just the mix of a song like this, because the bass is just so prominent in the mix, and you hear him kind of going off throughout not only this track, but really the whole album. Some solid guitar solos, and right before the first, or I should say the final verse, it kind of picks up speed a little bit, which I'm often a fan of. I think this is a great album opener, and I can't, as I think back, is there anything else that I would have opened the album up with? And the answer is no. Prowler is the hard rocker that really just launches this thing into the next level.
It's, it's interesting because I realized that towards the end of the week that there's an old single from the 80s where they re-recorded this song with Bruce. It was on the Evil That Men Do single, and we had discussed the Seventh Son album, but I don't know if we talked much about like the B-sides and the extra material, but it was interesting hearing that version. But it's almost like, as much as I appreciate like Bruce going back and singing these songs, I think I prefer it the way it was. Like, I think that these songs were meant to have Paul Di'Anno as their vocalist. It just fits the just that time period and the sound or whatever. Like, I'd be thrilled to hear the band play it live, but I mean, I don't know that I needed studio versions of the 88 lineup doing, these songs, I guess. Like, it's just, I think that they kind of stand up on their own and don't need that, I don't know, like, it's almost like revisionist history in a way, or just maybe just a curiosity, like what would it sound like if the band currently, played this. But I just really like the original version a lot. It's just a really upbeat rocker. And everything you said is spot on, and it's a great way to kick things off. So yeah, I like this one a lot as the opener.
Did you have a problem when Halloween went back and re-recorded the Walls of Jericho material with Kiss?
I appreciate it and I enjoyed it, but at the same time, it's like I think I still actually prefer the originals because that's just how they were meant to sound. And like honestly, like those versions of like Starlight and Victim of Fate, they're almost like a little bit too polished. Like those were songs that weren't meant to have that like Keeper of the Seven Keys kind of like polish to it. Like Walls of Jericho is such a raw album, and I think that's, you know, when I was a kid I probably felt differently. I was probably like, screw this, the production sucks, I want to hear Kiss sing everything, have Kiss come back and re-record Master of the Rings. Like I didn't know what I was talking about, like so like, you know, it's different now, like with, you know, hindsight's 2020 I guess. But I didn't think I was a fan of Paul Di'Anno's vocals for the longest time because Bruce is such an icon. But when you listen to these two albums, like, you know, start to finish, and you get the whole picture, and it's not just random songs here and there. It's not just Phantom of the Opera, and it's not just Iron Maiden. You can see that, like, this was, I don't know, a very cohesive sound. We'll get to a track where I think that it becomes clear that they need to get a vocalist like Bruce Dickinson, and I'll mention that when we get to it. But like for the most part at this time, this is exactly what it needs to be, and I don't need it to be any different.
I love that. I think that that's really well said. I liked the polish of those Halloween tracks where they did it differently, but that is the right word. It was a polished version of a really raw sound, so I don't know that it necessarily needed to be. It was just different. Where I think Iron Maiden got himself into trouble, I shouldn't say trouble, but where the band kind of lost or where its popularity kind of waned, was when Di'Anno leaves the band. They record masterpiece after masterpiece with Bruce, and then all of a sudden Blaze Bayley comes in and has to sing live all the classic tracks that fans want to hear, and he's just not Bruce Dickinson. I think that there's actually some really good material on those two Blaze Bayley albums. I'm really looking forward to talking about them at some point, because I don't know that you've ever heard them, and there's some really good songs on there. However,
there's a couple of songs I really like from that era, Man on the Edge being one of them. I actually threw that song on the other day just because I hadn't heard it in a while, and I was thinking about it because I don't know those albums that well, but there are a couple of songs that I really like. And yeah, like Blaze Bayley is never going to be held in the same breath as Bruce Dickinson, neither is Paul Di'Anno for that matter. But like, I think sometimes you have to, and again, what's useful about this is that, you know, so much time has passed that you can look back on it and be a little bit more fair. But at the time, you know, I'm sure like you go from this like monumental era of the Bruce Dickinson era of Iron Maiden, and then you move on to like these two albums with a different singer. And I don't know that anybody would have been able to fill his shoes. Like, I know that there's talk that like Michael Kiske or even I heard Andre Matos had been thought about. And like, let's be real, like we love those vocalists. They would have the people would have crapped all over that because it wasn't Bruce.
It wasn't. And the fact of the matter is, even to this day, like live, the man has a gift. I'm not saying he's the greatest vocalist who ever lived. There's people with better voices, but he was the sound, and anything that was different than Bruce, no matter how much I love both of those singers that you just mentioned, it would have flopped. It just wouldn't have done well. And so they were almost smart to go with a guy like Bayley, who people had never
he also brings an attitude and a stage presence in the live aspect that is unmeasured. It's unmeasurable, and it's even at his age now, I think that there's people half his age that would struggle to be the front man that he is. So that's a big part of it too. It's not just the actual quality of his voice, but it's just the whole package. Like, I remember when Ed Guy first came out and they were looking at a way to describe Tobias Sammet's vocals, and they were like, it's like the smoothness of Kiske meets the balls of Dickinson. Like, that's how they kind of described him. And so like, but I mean, there's just, you have to see the man live to really understand like what the draw is and why most people wouldn't be able to live up to that.
Yeah, and that's the reason that it's almost like I've seen this band live so many times, and I go back for more because it's just such a good live show. They are probably the best live band I've ever seen in terms of just consistency and everything else. And there's others that are up there. I've seen some Halloween shows that have just knocked my socks off, but Iron Maiden live with the production value and the gimmick, the imagery and the gimmick and everything else, tough to beat. And these guys are all in their 70s, but they're still kicking. So God bless. But as we
they must have a hell of a personal trainer.
I'll say, I mean, it's unbelievable. These guys are in great shape. I'm so curious as to whether or not the version of this album you heard included the second track that I'm going to mention, because not every edition of this album has the song Sanctuary. If you listen to the 2015 remaster, which is like the most recent version of this album, it doesn't appear. It only appears on the version of the album that I actually have, which is the 1998 remaster when I bought all the remasters around the turn of the century. So there's this track, Sanctuary. It's a 3-minute and 16-second track that's not on every edition, and I'll get into it in greater detail. I'm just wondering if you even listened to it or heard of it.
Yes, but not here. It was
okay.
It was after Strange World on the edition that I have.
Interesting.
Which was where it was placed on when the album first came out in North America. Apparently it was not on the original UK version of the album. I didn't know that there was a version where it was the second track. So that's really interesting. I have Remember Tomorrow as track 2.
All right, so we can either hold off on it or we can talk about it now. I leave it up to you, but I want to make sure that it gets mentioned because I do think it's a unique song in that it's not on every version, and it's got it is a classic song in many ways.
I say we hold off because we'll go by the original North American pressing.
Very good, very good. That's why I bring it up. I found it fascinating. Remember Tomorrow almost feels like a ballad at the beginning of the song, almost like a late era Beatles tune, just at the very start, which I found to be fascinating. I'm like, I Am the Walrus, Remember Tomorrow. Really, what's the difference, right? And then all of a sudden, it starts picking up steam as it heads into that first chorus. The verses, I think, have like this fantasy quality to them, almost like just like a fantasy quality to them, but the chorus is a much bigger, more powerful sound. Not my favorite Di'Anno performance, but at the same time, I thought he does a really good job on the album as a whole, especially when this song starts picking up around 2 minutes and 25 seconds in. The pace of this song really picks up, and I love the instrumental section, but it's not my favorite song on the album.
Yeah, it's true. There is like kind of this weird, like maybe Zeppelin-esque kind of vibe, like old school 70s hard rock, like ballad thing going on at the beginning. But this is a song I had made mention earlier where you start to think, can we maybe get a better vocalist for right at that 1 minute mark where there's this higher note, at least for Paul Di'Anno's register, where he has to hold it out. And it's, it's not the best. And like, I picture like Bruce would have slayed that note right there.
Yeah.
And so like, it's for things like, for things like, the opening track Prowler and Running Free, I think Paul Di'Anno is like perfect for that style. But this, has a little bit more of like a progginess to it that I think you need a more seasoned vocalist to handle like that. Literally just that one part. The rest of the song is like, pretty much in Di'Anno's range and isn't really, nothing really stands out as negative or bad. But I think that was that moment where I was like, man, Bruce, I think Bruce would have really nailed that part right there. But, it's like basically anytime they're about to start to get heavy again, he kind of like does this kind of like squealing, like kind of sound. I wouldn't call it as much of a warble as I would a squeal. Then the song really picks up with like a really classic Iron Maiden like sound with the guitars and everything, and the bass and the drumming and stuff. It's really like a tale of two songs wrapped into one.
Do you like it?
I do. I think it's a really solid tune, and I think that it makes for a good follow up to like a really high energy opener to have something that's a little bit understated at times before going into another like fast paced banger like Running Free.
I think that's fair. As we transition to Running Free, there are certain songs that I like listening to, but love hearing live. Power by Helloween comes to mind. It's a good song on Time of the Oath, but it is a much better live song, in my opinion. I would put Running Free in the same category. My first exposure to this track was on Live After Death, and I fucking loved it. Hearing Bruce sing that song was like a cathartic experience. I was like, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It's just, I'm like, I need to go see this band live, right? Like that to me is how good this song was. When you listen to it on this album, it's still a great song. The intro is awesome with the drums, and then the bass comes in and the riff comes in over the top. Like, it's a well-constructed piece. But in my mind, it's a little too polished. Like, even though it's got this raw feel to it, it's a little too polished, it's a little too short, it's a little too succinct, whereas the live version is just more raw, more powerful, and I thought it's just such a good song in a live set that I like the studio version, but much like Power, I prefer to hear it live. And I'll say this, I thought it was a song, and Patrick Celsus, I believe, from the Patreon group, mentioned this. I'm surprised that this wasn't in the most recent live set, because I felt like if they were going to go back to the album, this would have been one of the songs that they kind of picked to play live. So kudos to him. I just wanted to give a shout out there because he mentioned it, but I was surprised that it wasn't in the latest set list.
I mean, yeah, considering like how often it made the set list for all the years following the debut album, I would agree with that. I think it says something that when an album like, Best of the Beast comes out in '96, this is when, Blaze is still in the band. And this was literally my first exposure to the band on your recommendation. I remember you said, buy this CD and just listen to like the best songs by Iron Maiden. It was like literally the single disc edition. So we're talking like, the obvious of obvious Iron Maiden songs, Number of the Beast, Aces High. I heard Aces High and it was over for me. I was like, I'm a fan of this band.
As a Halloween fan, when you hear Aces High, you're like, oh yeah, this is scratching the itch.
Yeah. I was like, how did I not listen to this band up to this point? I'd been a fan of metal for about a year, and I was like, how have I not listened to this band yet? But it says something that they chose the version of Running Free comes from Live After Death, and the version of Fear of the Dark is from a Real Live Dead one, and those are two songs where I feel like the live version is just like a different experience, and I feel like it made sense. Sometimes I don't like when compilations have live versions on it because I feel like it kind of takes you out of the kind of like running through a band's kind of history or whatever, and then all of a sudden you go from like the studio to a live setting. It's just kind of jarring. But I think in this sense, like those are two songs where like Fear of the Dark, the studio version, like I would skip it and just put on the live version. Like it's just so much better live for whatever reason. There's just certain songs, and Running Free is another one of them.
Well said. So I think we're in complete agreement there. Again, I like the studio version, but it's just not what it is live. However, then we get to Phantom of the Opera, and I'll just rip the Band-Aid off now. Is this your song of the week? I know you love this song, and I'm wondering, like, as I was listening to it this week, I was wondering if anything like supplanted it, but I know you're a huge fan of this song.
No, nothing supplanted it. It's I think one of the all-time great heavy metal anthems. It's and every time I listen to it, even though I'd heard it dozens of times before, I never get sick of this song. It's a song I love hearing Bruce do currently. I love the original. I think the original has a real kind of like the raw flavor of it, and the fact that like it's from the first Maiden album. I have absolutely zero issue with listening to this version or listening to a live version from a mid to late 80s live album, or seeing the band play it in 2025. I think this is one of my all-time favorite Iron Maiden songs, one of my all-time favorite metal songs, and I toyed with picking something else, but I'll let you do that. this is just an all-time great song that I love hearing other bands cover it and put their spin on it. It's just such a great song, and I think that it stands out. There's a lot of really good songs on this album, but this is like, I think when this song comes on, people are probably like, oh man, I think this band might be sticking around, because this is a really epic tune that has like parts where it slows down. There's an incredible bass solo. There's just so much going on, but I think that there's like a little bit in the middle of the song, a little bit of that progginess that I think Iron Maiden is going to embrace more of in the future. And I think you're getting a little bit of a taste of that in this song, and you get a little bit of that in the middle, because, you know, for a 1980 metal song, it's kind of long at over 6 minutes, you know? But it's never over 7 minutes, I should say. It doesn't overstay its welcome. Great solos, an excellent vocal performance. It's hard not to just like tap your foot and bang your head whenever this song comes on, and it's really one of my favorite songs. And I remember not hearing it until probably a little bit later into my metal education, and thinking to myself, like, damn, there's some good stuff on those Di'Anno albums. You know, other than Running Free, which probably was the only song I was aware of at the time. And I would feel that same way about the final track on the album, the self-titled band named, Iron Maiden song. But this just has everything, and I think that it really stands out. So, without further ado, let's give it a listen. I doubt anyone listening to this podcast is not aware of this track, but just in case, definitely worth hearing. Picking a minute probably isn't going to be the easiest thing in the world, because there's a lot of good minutes, but here is Phantom of the Opera. Good guess, by the way, as my song of the week, as if you couldn't tell.
So that was Phantom of the Opera, Chris's song of the week. And I'll just say this. Obviously, I didn't choose it as well, but it's not just the best song on the album. I think it's the best song of the Paul Di'Anno era. I'm with you lockstep on this track. The way it opens with that guitar and those bass licks, so good and kind of proggy in a way. It reminds me of stuff that would come later in the catalog. It actually reminds me of Rime of the Ancient Mariner, when the section just kind of slows down a little bit. There's this simple but extended melodic bridge, vintage guitar solos, and then this galloping instrumental section, which kind of brings it back to life. The song is almost like telling a story in terms of the way it's presented. I think it's just a fantastic track. And I'll just put it on record now. They added it to the set list for this current tour. They have not yet announced U.S. dates, but can I have a commitment from you that we go see this, whether it's up here or down in North Carolina or somewhere else, so that we can go watch them play this song live in 2026 or beyond?
Without a doubt. I mean, I've seen the band only 3 times. 2 of the 3 times were one of their throwback tours, where they would like basically repeat a set list. Or I think the first time I saw them was like I don't think it was a repeat of a set list, but it was just we're playing the old stuff kind of thing. I went with you to I think it was the Izod Center at that time in New Jersey.
Yep.
And then the second time I saw them, they were doing the Made in England, which I think was like their 88 tour. They were doing that set list. That was incredible. I got to see that one outside at the the Darien Lake venue in Buffalo. That was a blast. And then the third time was 2 years ago when we went to see them at UBS Arena, and that was a blast too. I've never had a bad time at an Iron Maiden concert. So yeah, I made the mistake with Rush, never seeing them live. So I'm going to try to fit in as many Maiden shows as humanly possible. They're also the sort of band where, like, when you find out the tickets are like $250, you're like, yeah, but it's Maiden, it's like, that's kind of how I feel about Pearl Jam. It's like, yeah, but it's Pearl Jam, it's Maiden, like when other bands do it, you're like, screw you. But with Maiden, it's like, you're getting your money's worth and you're going to. So it's like, whatever, don't quote me on that. But
their ticket prices are generally not as high as some other bands. I went to try to get Who tickets. They're playing a couple of shows in the area, and the Who, it's like you can't get in the door for less than $300, and that's like sitting in the rafters. Whereas Maiden, for like $150, you can get pretty good seats, generally speaking.
The Who has become so fancy that they should be called the Whom.
There you go. I mean, it's crazy, and so needless to say, I'm not going to see that show. But yeah, well, good times. I'm looking forward to the announcement of the American or the U.S. dates as we forge on ahead here.
Oh, before we move on, I just wanted to circle back to Running Free really quick. Yeah. This was the first single from the album. Do you think that this was the right call for the first single from this album?
Yes, I think that.
And it actually predates the album. It came out in February, whereas the album came out in April. So like this was really like people's first taste of Iron Maiden if they didn't have the Soundhouse tapes.
I think it is because, again, with the benefit of hindsight, it's the most succinct track. It's not as quirky as Phantom or even Iron Maiden, which has a little bit of a quirkiness to it. I think it is the right choice. Prowler, I think, is a little bit too heavy. So, yeah, I actually think it would have been a good choice. It's also a short track at like 3 minutes and 20 seconds, so it's radio friendly in that regard. I think it is the right choice.
Yeah, I agree with you.
We get to a couple of the lesser known tracks now, and I start with Transylvania. And I say lesser known because it's like kind of buried in the middle of the album. People don't really talk about this in terms of like the great Iron Maiden songs, but I think that this instrumental song is really, really good. It's all the musicians really get a chance to kind of show off their chops here. The low end with Steve Harris's bass and some of the riffs are really heavy, and I think it drives this song. And I think it has a really nice cadence to it. I find myself kind of moving to the beat of this one. It reminds me of some of the material that you'd hear on Number of the Beast. So in that regard, it was a bit ahead of its time. And I like the changes in speed and the solid solos. I'm a big fan of this song. And if I didn't want to go with something else, I nearly picked it as a song of the week, but I wanted to have Di'Anno on display, so I didn't choose it.
I was thinking like the Paul Di'Anno fans would probably pillage your home if you picked the instrumental version. It would have been like if I had picked that opening track from the Creator album a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, this is good. I think for a band that has a lot of technical chops, I think it's good to have an instrumental track so you can kind of show off like the band can really hang when there's not a singer at the forefront. So yeah, I agree. This is a really good song. I think like you said, there's a lot of Iron Maiden to come on display here, and so it's cool. I love when they just pick up the pace and you have the two guitars just like just going with the drumming. It's really great stuff. Again, I'm going to repeat what I said earlier. It must have been just so mind-blowing if you were a fan of heavy music to pick up this album in 1980 and be like, whoa, like who the hell is this? And like, what a ride they had no idea they were about to be taken on. Or maybe, Number of the Beast came out and they were like, oh man, this band sucks now. Those first two albums are great. And they went the wrong direction.
There are Di'Anno fans that like, I'm not saying they don't like the albums, but they love those first two albums and maybe consider it the band's greatest work. I don't know that I would agree.
If that's where you started, I mean, I kind of understand it. Like, if that's your starting point for a band, sometimes it's hard to like let go of that first voice that you fell in love with.
I'll give a shout out to Charles Florio, another one of our Patreon members who loves Walls of Jericho, and I don't blame him because there's some really fantastic songs on there. I'm not sure that it's his favorite Halloween album. I think it might be. And that was his exposure. Like, he first heard them do Walls of Jericho, and then from there, I'm sure the Keeper stuff was great. But if you expect that raw speed metal sound, they move away from that and they go to more of that power metal stuff, which, they're adjacent to each other, but they sound different.
Yeah, well, think of there were people 20 years after Master of the Rings came out that were still calling for Kisk to rejoin the band, and now he's in the band, and there's probably still Kisk stands that are wishing Darius would just get out of the way. But, it's crazy to think about it. It's very similar in a lot of ways because Kisk was the singer for Halloween for about 6 years, and Andy Darius has
been the singer. And two of those albums weren't even like the listen, call it for what it is. We've talked about Pink Bubbles. Chameleon is what it is, but no Halloween fan is going to say that Chameleon is in the same breath as Keeper of the Seven Keys Part 1 or 2. So he was the singer for 6 years. But really the heyday was 2, 3, maybe 4 years, which is nuts.
Right. But Andy Darius has been their vocalist for, 31 years now? So
Yeah. It's when you hear something, when you hear something, it really has an impact on how things play out.
There are diehard Sabotage fans that don't love, the post-John albums where Zach came over. Those, for us, we listened to all that stuff simultaneously. So to us, John and Zach were the voices of Sabotage. But when you have that back history of listening to albums like that, I mean, I totally get it. And John had way more of a stretch as singer for Sabotage than Paul did for Iron Maiden. So it's interesting. Timing plays a big part in a lot of this.
There are people who literally don't want to go see Sabotage in this current iteration because it's only Zach and John is not there. And they're like, this is not Sabotage if John's not there. I don't 100% subscribe to that theory, but I understand conceptually why that feels the way it does. I happen to be partial to a lot of the Zach stuff. I won't even say partial. I just like a lot of the Zach stuff a lot. So to me, it doesn't bother me as much. But I can understand if they don't want to hear Zach singing Power of the Night. I get it. It's just not the same as John. I get it. So we're going off on a lot of tangents, but I think that they are very much in line with what is going on for, as people listen to this album.
100%.
And so,
but back to the task at hand.
But now we get to Strange World, and I don't know that it's even close for me, but this is by far the worst song on the album. It's not terrible. It's just not a song that I particularly enjoy. It's slower. It's a little bit atmospheric, almost like some of the material that you'd hear on Somewhere in Time. It has just never been my favorite tune on the album. I think it has gotten slightly better over time. I just don't particularly love Di'Anno's vocals during the verses, and I think it speaks to your point from earlier, maybe we could get a better singer to do some of the more the lighter material on this, because that's when a singer really gets a chance to shine. The problem with the track for me is that it really just doesn't kick into second gear. It just stays kind of mellow. And so it's not my favorite song. It's fine, but I could skip this and not miss a beat.
It's got kind of a bluesy quality to it, and I was going to say the same thing you did. It doesn't really ever pick up. It reminds me of that part in How Many Tears by Halloween where it slows down before it kicks back up again, except it just doesn't kick back up again. There's even a section of Phantom that I think has a part that's like this before that bass comes in and we're back at the races again. This is kind of, I guess, as close as you're going to come to getting a ballad on this album. I think I'm with you. I think it's probably my least favorite song on the album too. Again, not that it's a bad song. It's just kind of it kind of kills the pacing a little bit because this is a really upbeat and again, I don't know that it has a ton of comparisons to punk rock sound wise, but I think more tempo wise and beat wise and kind of energy wise, it does. So it's interesting there. I read that there's an interview with Steve Harris, and he said that Stratton, who Dennis Stratton, stated that he wasn't trying to push the band in a new direction, but Harris commented that it really pointed up the difference between Dennis and us, after which he began to notice that Dennis was so much more into playing stuff like Strange World than he was Iron Maiden or Prowler, because it was more slow and melodic. When he was soloing on one of the heavier songs, it wasn't with quite the same passion. So that's a really interesting counterpoint, and I kind of wanted to make sure I remembered to bring that up when we got up to Strange World, because it really is an outlier, I think, on this album.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's interesting because I think that they actually, I believe they actually played this live at some point, because I know that they recorded, well, I say it this way. They did a world tour in 2005, and the only songs that they didn't play from this album were Strange World and Transylvania. So one which I love, one which I don't like as much, but they did play a lot of this. And Bruce Dickinson did re-record this song on vocals. I don't know that I've ever heard the Bruce version. I'm going to go definitely take a listen to that because I'm curious, and maybe I would like it better. But this song was a miss for me. But you mentioned Sanctuary earlier and how it was placed after this track on the North American release. What are your thoughts on Sanctuary? It's a kind of a short tune. It's only about 3 minutes and 15 seconds. I think I first heard this around the time that I had heard Live After Death, if I'm not mistaken. I think it is one of the B-sides. There's a 2 CD version of Live After Death, and I remember hearing Sanctuary, if memory serves, on that. It doesn't really get the love. Oh, no, you know what? I stand corrected. No, it doesn't. I'm thinking of Wrathchild and some other tracks. So I remember hearing this, I guess, when I first heard this album, but it was never... Again, it was weird because depending on which version you listen to, it may not be on the album. So I don't know that I played it as much as some of these other tracks, depending on which version I was listening to.
It's odd because it was released as a single a month after the album came out, but yet wasn't on the original pressing of the album in the UK. And I'm wondering if I'm sure that it was recorded in the same sessions. I'm curious as to why it didn't make it onto the record, if it was a time thing or whatever, but it shows up on the North American version here. I'm not necessarily sure I would have noticed that this was out of place. It feels like it belongs on the record. It has a very driving kind of 70s rock kind of vibe to it, like very yeah, I'm probably going to bring up UFO again, I guess, because for lack of a better thought, but it just has kind of a bit of that we're still in the 70s kind of vibe to it. Not at all in a bad way, just kind of has that vibe where we're not quite moving forward towards what Maiden would become, so to speak. That said, it's a really solid song, and I would be thrilled to hear it live. Honestly, it's really up there with just one of the really fast paced that forward driving rockers.
Well, talking about hearing it live, have you ever listened to Maiden Japan? It was an album that came out in 1981, and it was basically a conglomeration of the first 2 albums live. And they play Sanctuary on it. So again, speaking to the fact that this song has a place on the album, they were playing it live on the Killers tour. Have you ever had a chance to listen to that? It's a really interesting listen.
No, I'm honestly didn't even know it existed, to be honest with you.
Then I will make sure you get a chance to listen to that this week. I think you'll definitely enjoy it. As far as the song itself, I agree with you in that it is a lot more hard rock and a lot less metal than some of the stuff on this album, and certainly a lot of the stuff that would come after it. It's a good song. I really love the bass lines, and I talked about that groovy drumming. You hear it a lot on a track like this. Tight guitar solos, short tune. It's good. It's not my favorite, but I think that it has its place on the album, and it certainly has its place in the pantheon of early Iron Maiden songs.
Yeah, well put.
And then we get to Remember Tomorrow. This one also has a bit of that ballady feeling, at least at the beginning.
We did Remember Tomorrow.
No, we did. I'm sorry. I was misspoke. Lost my place.
Come back to the brothel with me, please.
Yes, it's Charlotte the Harlot. I remember hearing this song and always thinking it was kind of a little bit of a joke. It's obviously got that lighthearted feel to it. But it was the biggest surprise for me this week. And you mentioned it as we were recording, but not actually on the actual feed of the podcast. This is my song of the week. This song is amazing, and I never really gave it the credit that it's due. I'm not suggesting it's a better song than Phantom of the Opera. I'll say unequivocally it's not. But I got more enjoyment out of this song than I think I did many of the other tracks, all of which I liked to varying degrees. So let's give Charlotte the Harlot a listen, then I'll kind of explain what it was that pulled me in this week. So that was Charlotte the Harlot. Again, I'll say it's the biggest surprise. Really heavy bass intro on this track, cool drum groove as well. The verses have a bit of punch to them. It's very melodic, very catchy verses, great vocals. This is probably Di'Anno's best vocal performance for me on the album. And the chorus is really catchy too, even if it's a bit unconventional and a little repetitive. The bridge has that 70s hard rock feel, but all in all, I think it is a rather metal tune that's well done. Not my favorite tune, not the best tune, but it's the one that kind of punched me in the face the most this week. So I'm making it my song of the week. I really enjoyed it, and I don't know that we've ever talked about it like seriously, other than the occasional joke. What do you think of this song?
It was definitely my most pleasant surprise of the week. I always remembered the title of the song because it's so memorable for it's just funny. Tongue in cheek, if you will. But I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was. I just you look at a song title like Heavy Metal Hamsters and you're like, this probably isn't going to be the band's next, Eagle Fly Free. But this song really stands up with the rest of the album. It does, I think, much like Phantom, it shows that side of Maiden where they're going to kind of go back and forth between kind of a quieter sound and then start rocking out again. The song in general, I think, has kind of a mid-tempo pace, but it's really catchy. I love in the chorus how the drums are go along with the lyrics. It's a couple of notes on this one. This is the band's only song to have been credited to Dave Murray alone. And it's the first of 4 Iron Maiden tracks about the fictional prostitute Charlotte, although Murray states it was based on a true story, which I would love to hear.
Oh, man, tell me about it. Now, do you want to talk about a B-side? I want to hear that story.
So yeah, this is it's a really good tune, and I think is really well placed as the penultimate song to the album, which finishes off with a real all-timer in the title track.
I remember hearing Iron Maiden the song when I got Live After Death. I remember hearing it live, and it took a long time for this song to kind of click for me. And I don't know why, because it's a short song. It's rather succinct. It's memorable. It's just, I don't know. There was something about it that I just didn't, maybe it was the punk influence, because I think you hear a lot of punk on this track, but it's just something that never clicked for me until 2005 or something like that. And about 20 years ago, I'm like, this song is fucking awesome. And now I know why it's in every set list. It really came on after a while. It's fast, it's catchy, it's just heavy enough. And every time I hear it now, it reminds me of the live show because, again, it's just a staple in that set. That being said, I prefer this song with Paul Di'Anno. And obviously I love Bruce, but when I hear this song, I actually think it's better with Di'Anno. It is just a classic sound to this, and I don't get tired of it. I hear it time and time again. Some people will say it's time to grab a beer before the encore, but like,
oh hell no,
I think it's a great track.
Yeah, I disagree with that mindset totally. I love this song. Agreed. I like Di'Anno here. There's a tone that he has that Bruce just can't replicate because he just has a different voice. Like, it's just the way that it is. This is what Paul sounds like, and this, I think, might be his best performance as Iron Maiden's vocalist. But man, probably one of the most memorable opening riffs to any Iron Maiden song. Arguably the band's theme. It's their theme song. It's literally called Iron Maiden, but it really never stops, and other than just to repeat that opening riff again towards the end of the song. But I mean, this is just an absolute headbanger from start to finish. And I think as much as Prowler was the obvious choice for the opening track, this was the obvious choice for the closing track. And we kind of harp on track order a lot. This is an album that I think was perfectly ordered. Like, the pacing is really good. Maybe the only small complaint could be, Strange World kind of taking the wind out of the sails a little bit, but otherwise, like, it's a very well paced, well ordered album, and just really caps off a really enjoyable experience that I wish I probably had listened to sooner than 2025 with this level of paying attention anyway.
Yeah, well said. And I'm looking forward to your score, but I want to talk briefly about some of these B-sides that you mentioned that you had heard that were kind of coming out around this time. And I'll start with Burning Ambition. This song is fascinating to me, and I'm not sure that I ever paid any attention to it. But of all the things I listened to this week, this was by far the most fascinating song I have heard, and I'll tell you why.
You'll never believe what band I'm going to compare this to, by the way, but please continue.
Oh, I will, because I'm going to tell you what it is right now. Rush.
Okay, yeah, I'm even more in the weeds than you are, I'll be honest.
All right, well, I want to hear, but I'll just say this. I heard the guitar work on this song, and I immediately thought Rush. The song itself has like an alt-rock vibe. This song is like 15 years ahead of time. 12 to 15. I mean, the song could have come out in 1993, and you would have been like, this is a great alt-rock song. I can't believe Alice in Chains did this. It sounds nothing like Iron Maiden, but it's fucking sick. I love this song. It was the 90s kid in me that still has a soft spot for some of that alt rock was head over heels for this track. I could not believe how good it was. I'm dying to hear what the comparison is that you're going to make. Is it Collective Soul? What is it?
So I'm not going to be able to give credit, but somebody made a list before Senjutsu came out of basically ranking every single Iron Maiden song ever recorded, like every studio version. This song is the fourth worst Iron Maiden song according to this person of all time.
Completely.
With only The Angel and the Gambler, Weekend Warrior, and I Live My Way ranked lower. Granted, this is just one person's opinion, and this might be a fun list to maybe dive into on a bonus episode. I'd like to see if they made an updated version where they added the newest songs to it. But anyway, so
we need to do like the 10 worst Iron Maiden songs, or the 10 worst of something, or the 10 best.
The 10 in the dead middle of the list.
Right. Like, why is this so like meh? But anyway, go ahead. I want to hear. I disagree completely.
Yeah, I do too, because I actually toyed with making this my song of the week because I enjoyed it so much. 100%, I didn't hear it, but 100% agree with you on the Rush comparison. The beginning of the song, the guitar work is so Rush. The singing kicks in, I hear Green Day from pre-Dookie, like the Kerplunk 39 Smooth era of Green Day has, and that's why
the punk vibe.
Yep, exactly. You hit the nail right on the head. It's not really like just the way that the vocals are delivered. It's really just that. It's got a really simple but catchy and memorable riff. Like, this is such a neat song, and like I'm so glad that I listened to it because I had no idea about it. And it's great. So yeah, in case I don't know if you mentioned it, but this was the B-side to Running Free.
And I should say, this will never happen. This will never happen. But if I was to go to an Iron Maiden show and they just all of a sudden started playing Burning Ambition, I would lose my shit, right? It would be like going to a Halloween show and hearing them do a Blue Suede Shoes cover, like just like the most random thing that like you'd have to be the consummate fan to be into or whatnot. But great stuff. And I think that with that all said, it's the complete antithesis of Women in Uniform, another hard rocker that has just a touch of Revelations, which is a song I love, but this one is just not as good. It's enjoyable enough, but it is a B-side. It doesn't fit with the rest of the album, and I've got nothing much more to say about it.
Actually, I'll correct you. It's an A-side to the Women in Uniform single that came out in late 1980.
Wow.
It's a cover. I mean, I think it kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, Iron Maiden has about 10 songs up to this point, but like
I don't claim to be the biggest Montrose fan, so I'm not going to say that I've even heard the original, but it just doesn't fit with the motif of what they were doing.
The band was the Skyhooks. I don't know if that was a band that Ronnie Montrose was a part of, but it's kind of a fun song. I can understand why it wasn't on any sort of release, but the B-side to this was Invasion. What are your thoughts on this track?
This is a hard rocker, but with like a dirty feel to it. And when I say dirty, almost like a sleazy type of feel. Really good riffs. I like the guitar work, even though I think that it pales in comparison to basically everything we've talked about before this. I definitely hear some punk influence on this one. The tempo is upbeat. I actually like this song quite a bit. I prefer Burning Ambition, but I do like this song quite a bit.
Yeah, this feels like vintage Iron Maiden. I feel like just really speedy and has like a really frantic chorus. But yeah, another good tune. Like just another another tune that's just like I think classic to this era. And I'm glad that like digging into more of the really out there obscure Iron Maiden tracks. I wanted to make sure that we talked about all of them. So I think that pretty much covers everything from 1980 from the band. But yeah, this is a hell of a way for a band to make their debut to the world. I'm gonna let you lead with your score. I know you said that this is gonna score higher for you than Killers, which you gave a 7. Does this crack the 8.5 area for you, or are we in the 8 place? Where are we at?
We are at an 8, and I'll tell you why it's not an 8.5 or higher. Again, I don't think it's perfect, Strange World being kind of the demerit there. And although I love Running Free, I do love the live version better. So strictly looking at the studio version, I don't know that I would say it's a perfect song. It's a good song, a very good song, but it's not my favorite version of it. And so I have to give it a knock there, but it's an 8. This album is a classic album, and again is a launching off point for what would be a hell of a run for this band in the 80s. So I really was a big fan of it, and I'm curious to see what you give it, because you gave Killers an 8. Is this an 8 for you as well? Is it a tick better or a tick below?
It's literally one full tick better. I'm giving it an 8.125. I think that it's. I really enjoyed both albums a lot, but I think I think there's just a little bit more classic Iron Maiden that you're getting with songs that have stood the test of time, with Phantom and this title track and Running Free. So I think you have to give it a smidge bit higher. But I think that like if the ceiling or the basement for this band is like 7, I mean, that there's a lot of just a lot of great stuff to come, and we're gonna just fast forward 20 years next week and go to Brave New World, and that was really our homework assignment, wasn't it, to pick 2 very different eras of the same band and talk about it. Well, we're skipping a lot of albums that we haven't talked about yet that will need to be talked about, like Number of the Beast. But I think that this it makes more sense, I think, to talk about this, because this is kind of bypassing the entire Blaze era and going right to Bruce's return. And again, the anniversaries had a lot to do with my choice as well. Iron Maiden came out April 11th, 1980. And Brave New World came out in 2000 on, what's the date on that one? May 29th. So literally a 20-year and change gap between the two. But I felt like the timing was good for both of these. So I'm excited to talk about this. I think it's going to be a very different conversation.
It is, because the albums sound almost nothing alike. And I will say that I think that album in many ways paves the way for what the band would do for the next 25 years, because what they're doing now sounds a hell of a lot closer to Brave New World than Brave New World did to the debut. So I'll just say that. I'll leave it there. Good stuff. I'm looking forward to that conversation. I want to just give a couple of news items that I think are new and noteworthy, specifically starting with Battle Beast, who has announced their new album, Steelbound, which is coming out in October. And I mentioned that. I was going to say it earlier, but you were talking about the heavy hitters. This is another heavy hitter for you. I know how much you like this band. Get cracking, because this may be one of those late additions to your year-end list, because by the time November hits and this album is out and you've had a chance to digest it, you'll be putting the finishing touches on your list.
I know, but that's one of those albums I'm going to listen to probably 100 times in the first 2 weeks that it comes out, so it will receive its just due. I'm wondering if Beast in Black is going to release an album by the end of this year too, as I know their single was kind of like a what do you call it? Something that they did like for the Diablo video game or whatever. So it might be a standalone track. I have zero clue if there's an album on the way. But if they release an album this year, I don't know, man. It's a lot. I forgot that Battle Beast was releasing a new album. So add that. I mean, you might be able to just guess not in the order probably, but you could probably guess which 10 albums are going to constitute my top 10. Maybe that'll be a bonus episode at the end of the year.
Justin guesses Chris's top 10.
Yep. Not you. I won't task you with getting the order correctly, but I wouldn't be shocked if you actually got the 10, at least most of the 10 bands correct by the time.
You know something? I may do that in December. That may be the bonus episode. I'm just curious to see if I can do it, because what I know for sure is that Sleep Token is not on there, but Majestica is, and I'll just leave it at that. So
yeah, I think that's pretty safe to say.
Not
your most daring prophecy, I will say that.
I don't need it. I'm going to go with tried and true there, much like Phantom of the Opera earlier. Paradise Lost has announced their new album, Ascension, which comes out September 19th on Nuclear Blast. This is a band that has gotten a lot of love over their 35-year career, and I am woefully ignorant as to what they're all about. So I'm actually going to pick this new album up when it comes out, just to kind of dive into them. I saw them live once, but I didn't really appreciate or understand what I was seeing, because I just didn't know any of their material. So I have some inclination as to what it's going to sound like, kind of their gothy doom thing that they do. But at the same time, I'm not an avid fan, so kind of a homework assignment for me in September to check out this new album, Ascension. And another band that is releasing an album, but a live album, Powerwolf, is coming out with a new DVD/Blu-ray called Wild Live. It's basically coming out early March 2026, March 6th to be exact, on Napalm Records. As I mentioned, I've done a 180 on this band, especially because I saw them live. So that will be something that will be interesting to see. It's nice to see bands still coming out with live videos in some format or another. I don't have nearly the time that I used to watch them, but it's still cool that they're doing it.
It's one of the best things to just pour a glass of wine or whatever and just like sit back and kind of have a at-home concert experience. That reminds me, I desperately need to get the new Halloween Blu-ray that came out earlier this year. But speaking as somebody who owns the first Powerwolf Blu-ray, they put on their just production, their Blu-ray production is excellent. And just because of much like Iron Maiden, like they have such an amazing stage show and stage presence, it's definitely one of those things worth picking up. And that could be another really fun topic for a bonus episode, just talking about live. I think we've talked about live albums. No, I think maybe we have done that before. Have we talked about live DVDs or live Blu-rays? We'll have to go into the archives.
Yeah. If not, we're probably due for a round two. But yeah, cool stuff. I look forward to talking about that and watching it when it comes out. A big thank you to all of our Patreon members. Once again, we appreciate you all. If you like what you hear and you're new to the show, please give us a like and a follow. Consider joining the Patreon. Links are below in the show notes. This was fun, and I think next week's going to be even more interesting when we talk about Brave New World, which was in many ways a very new era for the band. So great choice. Any parting thoughts before we depart?
I have nothing else left to say, but that was fun. This is honestly, this is one of my favorite episodes we've done, just because I feel like Iron Maiden just makes our job easy. I feel like.
Yeah, well said. Well said. So we'll be back next week with Brave New World. Enjoy the week, my friend. I will talk to you soon.
Take care, buddy.